welcome. Good morning. How are you all doing? Drop it in the chat. How are things going? How's your day? How's your week? How's your life? What do you need today? Because that's really what we're here to administer to. What do you need in your life to keep going mindfully, to keep going with intention, to keep going so that you are at cause in your own life instead of at effect in your own life? Um, that's a coaching principle that I really, really love that we can. Oh, so far, so good. I'm so happy to see you, Jen. I can't wait to be with you today. Welcome back home. Um, uh, I forgot what I was going to say, but that's okay. Um, all this work is about intention, right? Oh, at cause versus at effect. So, it's so easy to just like wake up and hit the ground running and just start responding to your day, right? And then when you get to the end of the day, you're like, what the heck just happened? Or you look back and you see all these missed opportunities that you had to further yourself or to grow yourself or to meet your goals or it's so easy to look in hindsight at those opportunities. So what we do when we come together in the morning this way, either in community like this or on your own, is we interrupt that pattern, that unconscious pattern where we just sort of pick up each morning where we left off the day before, and we give ourselves an opportunity to create a new path, to intentionally create the experience that we want to go through in life instead of just accepting what's handed to us. So thank you for being here. And today we're talking about some yoga philosophy. We're gonna take a little overview of the yogic yamas, and I'm super duper excited about that. I hope that this will be really helpful for you. So before we get started, let's just kind of check in and go inward so that you can really kind of feel around inside of your own self and see what it is that you need this morning. Something that I say sometimes in my yoga classes is that if you don't know what you want, there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to get it, right? Like when you come onto your mat or when you come into something like this, and it's not like we have to always get something out of it, but it's helpful to know, like, I'm feeling a certain way, and so I'd like to administer to myself in a certain way. But if we don't feel around for that information, then you can't receive the antidote. So it's just kind of being clear on your needs so that when you listen to what I have to say, you can make sure that whatever I'm saying, you can funnel into your life in a way that's actually really useful to you. So what we'll do today is we're just going to take a short breath practice. We're going to hold a mudra while we do so. And the mudra that we're going to practice today is called Grantita Mudra. I like teaching it because I like saying it. Grantita, it's when you spell it, it's Grantita. And what granthis are in yoga are these energetic knots that we form on the inside. It's actually this really beautiful concept. And there are 3 knots in yoga that we speak to. There's one knot that forms at the base of your spine at the root chakra. There's another knot that forms at your heart. And then there's another knot that forms at your third eye. And what these knots are is I like to think of them as governors. They kind of clamp off our energy flow so that you are more regulated inside, and so that they kind of prevent you from feeling things that you aren't quite ready for yet. They prevent you from feeling overwhelmed. And the knot that we're addressing in this mudra practice is the Vishnu Granthi, the Granthi, the knot that forms at your heart center. And again, these aren't bad things, right? These are protective measures. But what happens is they protect us from feeling too much. But in that protection, these knots also prevent us from experiencing growth or from expanding. And so this isn't, when we hold this gesture, it's not a gesture to undo the knots and let all the energy come flying in, right? Because that probably wouldn't be helpful. Rather, the intention is just that we hold this mudra and we sort of just ask, could we start to loosen our grip on these knots? Could these knots just start to kind of unfurl gradually over time? Can I trust myself enough? Can I trust life enough to start to just open myself a little more, protect myself a little less, so that I can grow, so that I can increase my bandwidth, so that I'm, yes, a little less protected, but a little more expanded, a little deeper, a little wider. You know what I mean? So if you'd like, let's come into Grantita Mudra. All you have to do is interlace your hands, just like you were going to say grace at night or something like that. Make sure your left thumb comes on top. And then all we do is literally connect the first finger and the second finger of both hands so that when you look down, it looks like two interlaced knots, right? Two interlaced knots that form through your thumb and your first finger. Hopefully you all can see that. And then we just place this whole gesture at the heart center because that's what a mudra is. It's a seal or a gesture. Then I would invite you to roll your shoulders up, back, and down so that your spine is nice and long. And maybe you even tuck your chin in just ever so slightly towards your chest. Yeah, and then if it feels right, if it feels safe, if it feels good, simply close your eyes and settle into the mudra. You can breathe long, slow, deep, and full in and out through your nose. I'll guide you through a breath practice here in a moment. But for now, just feel the intention of Grantita Mudra. That whatever protective veils, whatever protective mechanisms, anything that's keeping you stuck right now would just open itself, would just release a little bit here this morning so that maybe something new can get in, so that you might receive a new piece of information. It might touch you in a way that can help you so that you can create something that you haven't experienced yet. So that you can create a new way, a new path. So with this intention, just gently held in the back of your brain, in the back of your heart, in the back of your consciousness, I'll invite you into box breathing. So as you're ready, slowly inhale through your nose to a count of 4, 3, 2. Hold it at the top for 4, 3, 2. Slowly exhale for 4, 3, 2. Hold at the bottom for 4, 3, 2. Again, slow inhale, 4, 3, 2. Hold the inhale at the top for 4, 3, 2. Even exhale, 4, 3, 2. Hold at the bottom, 4, 3, 2. Again, inhale, 4, 3, 2. Easy hold for 4, 3, 2. Smooth exhale, 4, 3, 2. Hold the exhale at the bottom for 4, 3, 2. One round on your own. And take a full breath in. And a big exhale. As you're ready, just softly blink your eyes open. Come on back. You can release your mudra, open and close your hands, roll out through your wrists. How was that for you? What did that bring up for you? Hopefully that felt good. Box breathing is something that you can do at any time to help regulate your nervous system and bring yourself into your body. Hopefully, if you get nothing else from this morning's practice, that breath felt good to you. And now you know a new mudra. And really, like, mudras are so beautiful. They're, like I said, they're these ancient gestures or seals. And the thing that I love about yoga so much is that there's magic and majesty and power simply by placing your bodies in these shapes. Even just by saying the Sanskrit names, there's sacredness and power in the vibration of the syllables of the Sanskrit. So even just like hearing the Sanskrit or being in a yoga posture or holding these energetic seals with our hands, it funnels this energy into our system, right? So it really just requires that you believe that that could be possible, right? And then you hold this mudra. So if you know that you are a person who tends to be kind of locked into their ways, and you can tell that there are things that you are doing in your life that are protecting you, but that are also kind of holding you back, then Grantita Mudra might be something that you can incorporate into your life or into your practice. If you have a meditation practice and you regularly sit quietly, hold Grantita Mudra while you do so. If you normally go to a group yoga session, a public class, when the teacher has you sit quietly, hold the mudra. When you come into horse pose, instead of placing your hands to your heart, hold the mudra. In balancing postures like tree, when the teacher says, express yourself in the way that feels good to you, you might hold your hands in the mudra. So these are just ways for you to come back to this energy and this intention over and over again. And there are ways that you can come back to your intention without having to engage your mind. And I don't know about you, but that feels so good to me that I don't have to, that the only place that I can move myself forward isn't just my mind, right? That this growth is available to me on all levels, in my body, in my mind, in my heart, in my spirit, in my relationships, right? And so I don't have to engage the mental mind all the time, because honestly, I'm exhausted by thinking so much. And so these mudras, these practices, these somatic practices that we do with our bodies are so beautiful, because they allow us to turn this sucker off the mind and drop into the body. Okay, but I digress, because today we're talking about yoga philosophy. So here we go. So, why is yoga philosophy important? Well, there are these 8 limbs of yoga that Patanjali put together for us thousands and thousands of years ago. Patanjali, much like all the ancient texts, like even texts from the Bible, we're not exactly sure exactly who wrote everything, right? Like even in the Bible, it's like it could have been, you know, a specific person or a collection of people. There's just some mystery around that. And the same is true for these ancient yogic texts as well. So Patanjali could have been one man, because back in that time, yoga was only available to men. It could have been just one man, or it could have been like a panel or a collection of men that came together to form these 8 limbs, and now we call that entity Patanjali. But in a sense, essentially, Patanjali put together this 8 limbed path of yoga that we really build our experience off of, especially, I don't know if especially, but definitely here in the West. And so, what I'm going to share with you today is my current understanding of all of these concepts. And please just know that this is a very vast body of work. And even for my own journey, like my concept or my understanding of these concepts is always shifting and changing. So, there's really no right or wrong in my mind. It's just sort of this evolution. So, along the 8 limbed path of yoga, our Western minds tend to look at it very linear, is that we start at the beginning and we end at the end. But really, these 8 subsets of yoga, these 8 ways to practice yoga, are they kind of build on one another, and you move back and forth between them, and they stack on each other. So the first two limbs on the 8 limbed path are the yamas and the niyamas. The yamas are what we're going to talk about today, and these are basically our ethical codes for how to live. And they're not rules, they're not commandments, they're not things that you cannot break. They're suggestions for how to live life as a person full of wisdom, right? They're like, if you observe these, if you participate in these, if you practice these, they'll probably lead you towards a better life, and they'll lead towards more wholeness and health, not only on an individual basis, but on a communal basis. So these yamas and niyamas are the entry point to yoga. There's 5 of each, and the first 5 are more external, like how we treat others, and they kind of tell us what not to do. Some people call them the restraints. And then the niyamas, rather, are more inward, and they're called the observances, and they kind of encourage us towards what to do. So very generally speaking, the yamas tell us what not to do, the niyamas tell us what to do, and they together give us a way to interface with our internal selves and also with the people around us. The third limb on the eight-limbed path is the asana, the physical practice of yoga. And that's mostly, especially here in the West, the way that most of us come to find yoga. And really, most of us come to find yoga because we're suffering in some way. There's some sort of physical ailment that brings us onto the mat, and then we find that yoga makes us feel better. But then we also find that it doesn't just make our bodies feel better, it makes the suffering or the ailments that we're experiencing on the inside feel better too, which is really the whole point. So the asana, the physical practice, in my mind and my viewpoint, is a gateway to all the deeper layers. The external body is a gateway to the subtle body that lives inside. So that's the physical practice. The fourth limb is pranayama, the breath practice. The fifth limb is pratyahara, when we start to go inward, and then we have dharana, where we go inward, we cut off the senses, we start to meditate, and then we can meditate without focusing on anything. And then the eighth limb is samadhi, which is bliss, right? And so bliss is sort of like, I want to be really careful with my words, because here in the West we talk about goals and destinations, like samadhi is the objective, right? We're doing all of this so that we can transcend our struggles, so that we can transcend the minutia of life and live in the beauty and the impact of this spiritual journey. But bliss is not a destination that we like achieve and arrive at. Bliss is something that we can experience every single day, and then we kind of come out of it, and then we go back into it, and then we get distracted, and then we find it again, right? So, hi Jeremy. So bliss is not a place that we like ultimately arrive at and stay in. It's just a place that we try to incorporate into our daily lives as much as we can. So these eight limbs, they circumambulate around one another. And so what that means is they on each one stands on its own, but then they start to spin around the others and they form a relationship, right? All these limbs on the eight-limbed path form a relationship, and that relationship is your life, is your yoga practice. And so today, this morning, we're drawing our awareness to the first limb, the yamas, which is the crux of our yoga practice. And this is so beautiful because no matter what's happening with your body, the yamas and the niyamas give you a chance to experience and participate in yoga, no matter what's going on with your physical body, no matter where you are in the world, that you don't just have to be in the yoga studio to be doing yoga, that you don't have to be on your mat physically moving to be moving yourself forward, that really it's all yoga, my friends. And there's an opportunity to experience more connectedness, more wholeness, both inside and outside, by incorporating all of these eight limbs. So these yamas and niyamas give us a chance to take everything that we learn on the mat and go live it out in the world, again, which is the whole point, right? That the yoga would change us on the inside and would make us more whole, more united, more coherent, more unified on the inside, and that we would take those unified internal individual beings out into the world and participate with the world in a new way, in a cohesive, harmonious, healed, beautiful, whole way. How does that sound to everyone? I know it sounds like a pipe dream, I know, but I truly, truly believe, like I see what happens in the yoga space every time I'm there. And I just know that if every single individual on this planet was in a yoga class 3 days a week or whatever, I believe that the world would be a completely different place. Okay, the yamas. So the yamas are these ethical codes, and the way that we live them out is in layers. We can live these codes in our body, in our mind, and in our speech. They're an interrelation of our actions and our psychological conditioning. All right, so these are suggestions that honor the way a wise person lives. And they help us to bring awareness to the actions, again, in body, mind, and speech. Okay, so I'm going to share with you the 5 yamas today. And just stay with me because it's all like a both and. It's not like it's this, so this. The yamas are, like I said, the ethical codes that tell us what not to do, right? And then they're also directed to how we show up in community. But the secret sauce to these yamas is that by understanding them for ourselves on a deep internal cellular level, that actually allows us to understand how to incorporate these in community. So I think you'll see when we dive in. So the first yama is called ahimsa. Ahimsa in the Sanskrit translates to non-violence. So in Sanskrit, himsa, Himsa, is violence, and we put the A in front of it. And anytime there's an A in front of a word in Sanskrit, it negates the word and turns it into its opposite. So ahimsa is non-violence. All right, and so what do you think of when you think of nonviolence, right? There's often what I find in the yamas like a very sort of superficial easy portal to start with. And that's where most people spend their time. And so I'm here to show you that and then to invite you to drop in even deeper. So ahimsa, nonviolence. We don't harm other people. We don't hit them. We don't strike them. We don't injure them, right? So that's the most obvious, superficial definition of ahimsa, is not physically harming another. Okay, so we've got that, right? That one's like the obvious interpretation. But what I'll offer you today is, how do you practice ahimsa or nonviolence towards yourself? All right. So today I'd like to offer you, how do you speak to yourself? How do you think about yourself and others? How might you judge yourself? These are all ways that we harm ourselves internally, right? Is negative self-talk, thinking in this judgmental lens. Here's something: if you're judging yourself or you're worried about what others think about you, usually that means that those are the things that you're thinking about yourself. Okay? So ahimsa, when we internalize it, when we say, yes, of course, I'm not going to beat up my neighbor, we take it a little bit deeper. What does nonviolence really mean? I offer that you can practice it on a very personal level by beginning to notice the internal culture that you have created in your own ecosystem, right? Is it one of harm and judgment and sort of internal violence? Do you flog yourself into your goals? I talk to a lot of my clients about using negative energy to fuel a positive result. So many of us have become accustomed to sort of hating ourselves into achieving our goals. And if that is you, then you might have an opportunity to practice ahimsa internally, right? And to shift your self-talk from being flogging, from beating yourself up, from judging yourself, from shaming yourself, from labeling yourself, into being more kind to yourself. And almost always the pathway out of self-flogging and himsa towards self is something more neutral, some sort of acceptance, some sort of just setting down your weapons and saying, hey, I don't know how much I can like wrap my arms around this right now, but I'm going to choose not to beat the shit out of you right now. Okay? And so notice what's coming up for you. I encourage you to write this down if it's meaningful to you. And today, your opportunity to practice yoga off the mat could be to notice your own self-talk. Notice the judgment towards yourself and others. Notice how that makes you feel. Notice how it affects the other things in your day. And sometimes just the noticing can be enough. Sometimes just the awareness, just the noticing can open our eyes and sort of clear a path for a new behavior. Sometimes we don't even have to fix it. It's just, again, developing that awareness. Does anyone have any questions about ahimsa or anything that's coming up for you? So the other side of ahimsa is self-love, kindness, and compassion. So my boyfriend is really amazing. He works in mortgages and he's literally like a professional problem solver. And he has this really cool, like, he says that I think one of the reasons he's good at his job is he spends more time living in the solution than he does in the problem. And I know that I'm a person that tends to get bogged down in the problem of things. And so when I offer you, like, I'll show you, here's what we're doing. And then, like, again, it's a both and. In order to heal it, we have to understand it. So we don't want to like jump out of it right away, right? First, we have to stay here and build awareness. But then as you're ready to move on, it helps to kind of train your eyes on the opposite of the thing that you're trying to heal, so that you can spend your energy in the solution and not the problem. So as you develop awareness around Ahimsa and you start to move your way out of it, the target that you're moving towards might feel like self-love, kindness, and compassion. Okay? I know that this is a lot. So let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so that's one way that you can practice Ahimsa in your life. The second Yama is called Satya, or truthfulness. In Sanskrit, you spell this Satya. So this is literally being honest, telling the truth, all right? So what's the obvious expression of that, right? Not to lie. Not to lie to your partner, not to lie to your people, not to lie to your employer, et cetera, et cetera. So that if you're a person that tells a lot of white lies, or you're telling a lot of stories to a lot of different groups to keep yourself safe, then that might be the practice for you, is learning to build safety so that you can tell the truth in all these different places. And if that's you, that's perfect. You can practice right there. If we drill down deeper, what's the opportunity to practice truthfulness inwardly? Because really, when we practice these things inwardly, it makes it so much more real when we take it outward. And also, as Westerners, I don't know if this is an American thing or just a current day society thing, we are people who don't really love to take responsibility for ourselves. I'll just say it. And so it's so much easier for us to be like, oh, I'm practicing this because I'm not lying to anyone, right? It's so much easier for us to like look at the outward than it is the inward. And so even though these yamas are a practice of how to be in relationship, for me, it almost always makes more sense to internalize everything before you externalize it, to understand it in your own bones, in your own blood, in your own brain, in the inner workings of your own life. And then when you take it outward, it's that much more impactful and authentic. So Satya is all about truthfulness, which is authenticity. So really, can you examine the parts of your life where you're not being honest with yourself? All right, can you examine the parts of your life where you're choosing to be nice instead of being real? All right, so what does that feel like when I say that to you? Where are you being nice instead of being real? And that might be your opportunity to allow Satya to come more alive for you, to practice this yogic principle off your mat and into the world. So this is all about owning your own uniqueness and your, authenticity. And I'm going to share something with you that is so beautiful to me. I might get a little emotional. That a lot of us, if we're going to be truthful, then we have to own our truth, and that means we have to speak it and share it and communicate it, right? And for a lot of people this is hard. For a lot of women this can be hard. Women have been taught to not have very many needs, to not rock the boat, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in yoga, I find this so fascinating, is that the yogis refer to the voice as a vak siddhi, V-A-K, and then siddhi is S-I-D-D-H-I. And siddhi refers to this concept of transcendence. So voice transcendence, vak siddhi, is like the most pure use of your voice, right? But here's the clincher, is that the yogis actually believe that the voice is like an organ in the body. So it's not just the sound of your voice, it's the flesh of your voice, the flesh of your voice box, of your windpipe, of the organs that make communication possible. And so they're speaking to the whole mechanism of the flesh of your voice. And the yogis believe that the more you speak your truth over and over, the stronger and more powerful and the more real it becomes, so that you can actually almost predict the future based on the power and authenticity of your own voice. I think that's so brilliant. And what does that mean for us in today's current society, with all the texting, with all the electronic communication, that so many of us are communicating our truths, but never letting it pass through the organ of our voice? right? I kind of want to do a teaching on that just in particular. Like, what is that doing to us that we're communicating our truths through our fingers and typing and not through box city, not through the flesh of our voice box? Oh, feels so powerful to me. So really, Satya is about being unique and authentic and being brave and courageous and willing enough to allow that authenticity to travel through the organ of your voice. Whew, so good. So, I can think of about, I mean, it's like hit me right between the eyes. Like, where am I not doing that in my life? Where are you not doing that in your life? Where do you have opportunity to bask in your own uniqueness and your own brilliance? And what would be possible for you in your life if you were to do that? That's how you live Satya internally, and that's how you build the bridge to learn to live it externally. So be honest with yourself so that you can be honest with others. Okay, Asteya, non-stealing. Asteya. So, non-stealing, we see this all the time in yoga spaces where people will print out a little flyer and say, remember to practice Asteya, which means don't steal other people's shit out of the locker room when we're all in class, right? Which is kind of horrifying that we need to even post that, but we do, right? So Asteya in its most obvious form is don't take other people's belongings when you're in a yoga class, right? But then what does Asteya mean when we really drill down? When we take it out of the obvious of don't take things that don't belong to you, don't covet other people's belongings, don't physically steal, it becomes this conversation about extraction, right? Not taking that which is freely given, which isn't freely given, rather. Taking things to consume rather than participate, right? So what's in it for me? Well, I'm doing this to get this, right? And we've been really taught this. We're very transactional as a culture, as I do this to get this. And then we lose all track of just being in the experience of being alive because we just want to get what we want. All right. And this can go really, really deep. Like, in which ways are you taking things that are not freely given, whether it's time or resources, other people's labor? How are we stealing from the earth, right? This one feels very potent right now. Like, how are we extracting the resources from the earth and then not replenishing her? How might we be stealing from the future with the choices that we make today? How are we stealing from ourselves in the way that we manage our time or our money, right? So this can go pretty deep, right? So take a moment to practice Satya, to be honest with yourself. And like, where are you being a consumer rather than a participator? And that kind of brings me back to this notion of circumambulation. It's like all of these kind of stack on top of each other. Can you see that if you're not practicing Satya, if you're not being truthful, that that's actually a form of Ahimsa, that you're harming people by not telling the truth, that you're harming yourself by not being honest with yourself. So by not practicing Satya, you're also not practicing Ahimsa. Does that make sense? And by stealing, you're also practicing not being truthful. So these all connect, these all interrelate. They spin around each other and they spin around themselves. Okay, so it's really this beautiful like interweb of wise living that we get to weave. So by not being a consumer and by being a participator, then we get to cultivate new ways of being in the world, new skills, new abilities, and we get to tap into our creativity. So that would be on the other side of Asteya. The next, we have two more to cover. So two more yamas. The fourth yama is called Brahmacharya, Brahmacharya. It's a mouthful, Brahmacharya. And this yama traditionally stands for moderation. And when it was originally formed, it was sexual energy moderation, so abstinence from sex in particular. But as this concept has evolved, it's more become this sort of regulation of internal energy. So how do you use your energy? We, again, as Americans, as Westerners, are really geared towards excess. If like more is more is more is more is always better. And what that does is it gets us attached to the moreness and separates us from experience. So I'm a person who used to drink too much. I work with a lot of clients who tend to food or who turn to food to tend to their internal feelings. So what happens when we drink too much, when we eat too much, when we spend too much, when we sleep too much, when we watch too much TV, whatever, is that we get lost in the excess of our coping mechanism, which just separates us from the actual experience of life. And so Brahmacharya, they call it, it's actually learning how to walk with God, right? And so developing presence, practicing non excess, being able to discern what the body needs versus the story that we're telling about what the body needs. And what this does is it takes us out of greed and into appreciation and pleasure. And it's just sort of like the picture is like just walking hand in hand, moment by moment, day by day with the Spirit of God. Just knowing that you have everything that you need in every moment, that every moment is holy, that every moment is perfect just as it is, and that you don't need to fall into excess in order to feel better or in order to be in right relationship with life. So this can be, in my mind, it's usually an excess of things, but it can also like if we're not moderating our energy and like giving too much, right, that also creates scarcity and lack and a lack of energy on the other side. So Brahmacharya can lead to codependency, it can lead to martyrdom, right? So it's like if you're giving too much, how can you be a person that can rein that back, use a right regulation, right use of energy, and give the appropriate amount so that you're not resentful, so that you're not feeling like a martyr after you give. Okay, so there's a lot of applications for this. So where are you indulging? Like maybe it is in sex, maybe it's in alcohol or another type of drug, maybe it's in food. So how can you practice presence in each moment and convert that sort of need for more into the appreciation of the pleasure of the moment? Cool. Let me know what's coming up for you. Finally, we have Aparigraha, which is our final Yama, and you spell it Aparigraha, Aparigraha. And this translates from Sanskrit into a concept non-clinging, non-attachment. And I think that this is like at the core, at the center, at the crux of so many of our other tendencies and behaviors. So Aparigraha describes our tendency to want to cling on to things, to want to hold on to things. Like I've shared in other morning rituals or other teachings that sometimes it feels like life is like this backpack and it's full of rocks and these burdens and these struggles that we carry. And then we set them down at night to go to bed, and then the second our eyes open the next morning, we just pick up that bag of rocks and start trudging along again. And so that can be a form of Aparigraha, is like clinging to your struggle, being really attached to your pain, being really attached to your story. Maybe it's your victim story, right? So Aparigraha can be like clinging to your story, maybe clinging to parts of your identity. It can be an attachment to things that you don't want to lose, right? It can be an attachment to the way things are for fear of the way they could be. The most beautiful picture that I have of Aparigraha, and I want to give you this resource, The Yamas and the Niyamas by Deborah Adele. So much of what I've learned about these principles come from this book. It's this little itty bitty book. I've recommended it to so many of my friends and they've loved it too. It's this really easy way to understand these principles in everyday life. So I definitely recommend this. But Deborah Adele says in her book, she says, the bird cannot hold on to its perch and also fly, right? So you can't cling to where you are and also get to where you want to go. All right. So where are you clinging to the way things are? Where are you trying to force things not to change or to stay the same, right? And what would happen if you would open up your hands and let go? I was actually looking at my story, or not my stories, but my Facebook memories, and someone posted on my wall like 9 years ago today something about like the bird sitting on the branch does not trust in the branch, right, not to fall. She just trusts that if the branch does fall, that she can use her wings to fly, right? So we get really, really attached to these forms of security when really, like, we are our own deepest form of security, that we learn to trust our own wings instead of this branch that we stand on. And so the willingness to open our hands and test that out, okay? So where are you clinging in your own life? Like, where are you attached to your pain, to your struggle, to your burdens? Like, what parts of your identity are you super married to, right? And what would happen if you were to move from that attachment more towards like participating and creating intimacy, but just without possession, right? How can you participate with your life without making it mean something about you? Okay. All right. That's what I've got for today. Does anybody have any questions? So I've given you five portals to practice your yoga off the mat and into the world. Five portals, right? To start to develop an understanding that it is all yoga, my friends. The way you treat your business is yoga. The way you treat your family is yoga. The way you make money is yoga. The way you eat is yoga. The way you vote is yoga, right? All of this is yoga, and we have an opportunity with each of our thoughts, each of our words, each of our actions to create more harmony and wholeness and integrity, or we can do the opposite. All right. So if you're someone that shows up to your mat every day, this is your next step, right? This is your next step to take that peace and wholeness that you experience in the gateway of your body and start to expect it to show up in the other areas of your life. That word expectation is a hard word because I feel like we already have all these expectations, and so much of the work is like releasing expectations. And also, sometimes I think as a yoga teacher that people show up, come to their mat, and they're like, okay, see you next time, right? And I'm like, no. Like, is this practice changing you? Is this practice making your life better? Is this practice making the life of your family better, of your coworkers better? And if not, let's solve that, right? Let's draw awareness to the pathways that bridge what we do in the yoga space out into the world, and then let's see what happens, right? But this is the work, and it starts on the inside, and when you finally understand it on the inside, that's when you get to turn it outside, and that is when we are talking. And one more final thing is there's a lot of conversation in the yoga space about cultural appropriation and about white women teaching yoga, and it's hard. Like, I don't have the answer, and sometimes I feel like, I don't know, I have varying different degrees of thoughts on that. But here's one thing I know for certain is that me as a white woman and us quote unquote as white people in the yoga space, or non-Indian people in the yoga space, is that one way that we can tend towards that issue of cultural appropriation, of using another culture's practices to our own benefit, is that if we stop being consumers and start being participators. That is how we honor the yogic tradition and the people and the culture and the lands that gave it to us, right? Is that we stop just taking what we need and saying, thanks, teacher, see you later. And we start to really internalize these concepts for us and give them back into the world through our own wholeness, through our own gestures. So let this practice change you, and then let that change touch and make the rest of the world better. And I know that doesn't solve all of this whole conversation, but I truly believe it's a step in the right direction. So if you'd like more support on how to participate rather than consume, I would love for you to work with me on a deeper level. There's multiple ways to work with me. My traditional package that I offer year-round is 6 months of weekly coaching. That's 24 sessions, and it's so magical and beautiful, and we get to go deep. And 6 months is a really perfect amount of time to take all this conditioning that you've received in the decades and decades that you've already been alive and reroute it into new patterns of being.